The Wilson family's annual reunion hadn't changed one bit. It was just as stiff, fancy, and uncomfortable as I remembered. My aunt's mansion was glowing with golden lights and expensive chandeliers that sparkled above our heads. The room smelled like luxury perfume and tension, and everyone wore designer clothes like they were trying to outshine each other. I stayed in the corner, quietly sipping champagne and watching. My cousins were bragging about their latest promotions, business deals, and fancy trips. I wore a simple black dress, nothing flashy, because I didn't want to be noticed too much. I didn't belong in their world, and I had no intention of pretending I did. "Olivia," my Aunt Patricia's sharp voice rang out, "I almost didn't see you over there. Still working as a secretary, dear?" I smiled a little behind my glass. "Administrative assistant, actually." "Oh," she replied, raising one of her perfectly shaped eyebrows. "Still at that little company? What was it called again?" "Summit Solutions," I said quietly, like it was just some small-time job. My cousin Ethan, who had just become a partner at his dad's law firm, came over with a smirk. "Liv, seriously, I could help you find a real job, something with an actual future." I thought about the stack of important contracts waiting on my desk. My desk, not someone else's, but they didn't know that. "I'm happy where I am, thanks," I said calmly. "Happy?" Aunt Patricia let out a sharp laugh. "Darling, that's not what I'd call success. Look at your cousins, CEOs, partners, people who actually run things, and you're still pushing paper for someone else." If only she knew that the someone else was me. They didn't know the truth. 10 years ago, in that very house, I stood with a brand new business degree and a big dream. I had worked hard on a plan to help struggling companies turn themselves around. I thought my family, with all their connections and power, would support me. They didn't. They laughed. "Consulting?" my Uncle Robert had said. "Leave that to the big guys. You want to succeed? Join the family business. Start at the bottom and climb the ladder, just like the boys." The boys he meant were my male cousins. Of course, in the Wilson family, success was only for the men. Women were supposed to marry well or take a nice, quiet job in the background. That was our limit. That night, I made 2 promises to myself. 1, would build my own company, without their help and without their knowledge. 2, I would prove them all wrong. Summit Solutions started in a tiny, stuffy office above a Chinese restaurant. I had just enough money saved to pay the rent, but I didn't need a lot. What I had was knowledge, vision, and grit. I knew how companies worked, and I knew how to fix them when they broke. My first client was a small factory that was weeks away from closing. Big consulting firms had already said no to them, but I said yes. I spent months working day and night, helping them cut waste, renegotiate contracts, and clean up their books. 6 months later, they were turning a profit. Word spread, quietly, about a mysterious new firm that could save businesses on the edge of collapse. I hired a small team that believed in what I was doing. Everyone signed strong contracts to keep things private. No one knew I was the founder or the CEO. I stayed in the shadows, pretending to be just another low-level employee. Why? Because I knew my family. If they found out what I was really doing, they'd try to destroy it, so I let them think I was invisible. As Summit Solutions grew, I kept up the act. I kept the small office even as we moved into a big one downtown. When relatives asked about my job, I gave boring answers, on purpose. They weren't interested, and that was exactly how I wanted it. Meanwhile, my firm was doing the one thing my family hated, saving companies they wanted to buy cheap. The Wilson family built their wealth by buying failing businesses for pennies and flipping them for a profit. My company stopped that from happening. We saved those businesses before they could be taken. Now, after 10 years, Summit Solutions was huge. We had 12 offices across the country, top clients, and a reputation for being quiet miracle workers. And still, no one in my family had a clue. "More champagne, dear?" Aunt Patricia offered, giving me a fake smile. "Or maybe water's more your style. Those little jobs don't exactly come with bonuses, do they?" I took the champagne with a smile of my own. "Thanks. How's Uncle Robert's latest deal going? Wasn't it Williams Manufacturing?" She hesitated, just for a second. "There've been some issues," she said, "but Robert's handling it." She didn't know that the issues were because of me. 3 months earlier, Williams Manufacturing had contacted Summit Solutions. They were desperate. My uncle was trying to take over their company, and they needed help to fight back. We gave them a full plan, cutting costs, boosting performance, and raising their stock value. Now, Uncle Robert couldn't touch them. I heard they hired some consulting firm, Ethan added, probably a waste of money. These firms all make big promises and never deliver. I bit back a laugh. That waste of money earned us more than Ethan would see in 5 years. Oh, right, Summit something, he said, nobody serious. Dad says their CEO won't even show up in public, probably just some rich kid playing business. At that moment, my phone buzzed. A message from my assistant lit up the screen. Emergency meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Wilson Ventures wants a merger discussion. Urgent. I stared at the message. It came through twice. That meant it was serious. So, they were giving up on the takeover and asking for a merger instead. But to do that, they needed approval from Summit Solutions. From me. Tomorrow morning, they'd walk into a meeting thinking they could bully their way in like always. What they didn't know was that the person they'd be facing was me, not as their quiet little secretary, but as the CEO. Everything all right, dear? Aunt Patricia asked. I smiled, finishing my champagne. Perfect. Actually, I should leave soon. Big meeting tomorrow. Oh, she teased, taking notes for someone important? Something like that, I said, and as I turned to go, I was already thinking about the perfect outfit for the moment when everything changed. Because this time, I wouldn't be pouring coffee. I'd be sitting at the head of the table. Aunt Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. This has to be a joke. This is impossible. Her eyes were wide with disbelief as she stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. You've always been nothing. You were never important. I gave a small smile. That's exactly what you were supposed to think. I turned to Mr. Harrison, the CEO of a company my family had once tried to acquire. Would you like to explain to my family why you picked Summit Solutions instead of taking Wilson Ventures' original offer? He sat up straighter. Summit has the best reputation. When Wilson Ventures tried to take over our company, Summit offered a plan that helped us rebuild. Since then, our profits have gone up by 47%. James looked like he had just been punched. That plan, the one that ruined our acquisition, that was you? I nodded. I wasn't alone. But yes, I was part of it. I held up my hand and started counting. Peterson Electronics, Maritime Shipping, the Davidson Group, every company you tried to buy. I stopped you. My voice was calm. For the last 10 years, I've been quietly working behind the scenes. Every time your company tried to take over a struggling business and tear it apart, I found a way to help them instead. Uncle Robert's face turned red. You sabotaged your own family? I shook my head. No, I built my own company, one that saves businesses instead of destroying them. The fact that it got in your way, that's just karma. Ethan stood up, his voice loud and shaky. This is blackmail. I'm calling our lawyers. Sit down, Ethan, I said firmly. He froze. My voice had changed. I wasn't the quiet girl in the corner anymore. You might want to read those contracts in front of you, the ones your law firm worked so hard to secure. He looked down at the papers and suddenly, his eyes widened. That's right, I said, watching his shock spread. The biggest client your firm had this year, that was me. Maya stepped forward and handed out a document. This shows Summit's current financial position. We now have the power to buy controlling interest in Wilson Ventures, if we choose to. The room exploded into chaos. Aunt Patricia started hyperventilating. James was on his phone, double-checking the numbers. Ethan slumped into his chair like he'd just aged 10 years. This is blackmail, Uncle Robert shouted again. No, I said softly, this is business. The kind of business you taught me I would never be smart enough to handle. I stood up and straightened my jacket. You have until 5 o'clock today to review our merger terms. They're more generous than you deserve. If you refuse, we'll start buying your stock tomorrow morning. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Aunt Patricia, that champagne you were bragging about last night? I own that vineyard, bought it last year, and the coffee you were so desperate for this morning? That chain, too. I smiled. Looks like my salary covered my expensive tastes after all. Then I walked out. In my office upstairs, I finally let myself breathe. 10 years of pretending, of playing small, of being invisible, it had all led to this moment. Maya came in with a cup of my favorite coffee, freshly brewed from my own chain. Well, she asked, was it worth it? I looked around. I remembered the early days, when I used to bring coffee to these same rooms as an assistant, when they saw me as nothing more than a secretary, when they didn't even remember my name. Every second, I said. My phone started buzzing with messages. I didn't need to check to know who they were from. My family, the ones who were now realizing the truth. They would have plenty of time to process what just happened. Right now, I had an empire to run. The next 2 days were wild. The Wilson family was in full panic mode. Aunt Patricia texted, "Let's have lunch, sweetheart, I've always believed in you." Ethan sent, "Come on, Liv, we were just messing around, family sticks together." James wrote, "You can't do this, we're family, we're blood." I ignored them all. By noon the next day, Wilson Ventures board had scheduled an emergency meeting. By 3 p.m., they had agreed to the merger. But Uncle Robert wouldn't go down without a fight. He barged into my office, furious. "You betrayed this family," he yelled. Maya moved to stop him, but I waved her off. "Let him talk," I said calmly, not even looking up from my computer. "You think this is okay, after everything we gave you?" I laughed a little. "You gave me nothing. You taught me that I was worthless, that my only value was in staying quiet and supporting the men in this family." Then I looked at him. "But I learned from you. I learned how to play the long game, how to hide my moves, how to win." He looked exhausted. He sat down, all the anger draining out of him. "Why now?" he asked. "You could have stayed hidden." "Because I'm tired of watching you ruin good companies, the ones you're trying to acquire next. They don't deserve it. It's just business," he mumbled. "No, it's greed, and it stops now." I handed him a folder. "These are the final merger terms. We're taking over Wilson Ventures. You can stay on as a consultant if you agree to our new vision. If not, your exit deal is on page 3. He flipped through the papers, his hands trembling. "You really thought of everything." "I had to," I said. Later that day, Maya brought in newspapers. The headlines were everywhere. "Secret CEO exposed, how she built an empire in silence. Wilson family shocked by long-hidden power move." My phone buzzed again. This time, it was my mother. She had cut ties with the Wilsons years ago. Her message was simple. "I always knew you'd show them." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Wilson Ventures board welcomed the change. Stock prices soared. Former enemies turned into allies. The media couldn't get enough of the story. Aunt Patricia tried to spin it in her favor. Olivia always had potential. We supported her from the start. I released footage from last year's family party, 20 minutes of her mocking me. It went viral. She stopped doing interviews after that. Ethan tried to pretend he'd been part of the plan, but too many people had seen his shocked face. His law firm pushed him out within a month. James, he tried to pitch a partnership over lunch. We could dominate the market together. I smiled politely. "We're not here to dominate, we're here to lift people up." The biggest change wasn't in headlines or profits, it was in the people. Young interns thanked me for showing them that success didn't mean selling your soul. Women reached out with their own stories. Business schools invited me to speak. 3 months later, I stood on stage accepting an award. My mother sat in the front row, proud. Behind her were some of my former assistants, now leaders at Summit. I spoke from the heart. Success isn't about power, it's about how you use it. That night, Maya came in with one last update. Uncle Robert just retired. His resignation letter includes something surprising. She handed it to me. I read the last lines. "My niece taught me that real success isn't about control or greed, it's about making a difference. I wish I'd learned it sooner." I sat back and thought about everything that had happened. 10 years of silence, 10 years of being overlooked, and now, everything had changed. The next family reunion, I'd be hosting it myself, in the same conference room where I once served coffee. Maya knocked. "Your 4 p.m. is here, the CEO of Thomson Electronics." "Send them in," I said, "and bring coffee for everyone, the good stuff." As I stood up, I saw my reflection in the window. No more hiding, no more pretending. I had built an empire, not because of my family's support, but in spite of their doubt. I did it quietly, patiently, powerfully. Some called it revenge, others called it genius. For me, it was justice, with a perfect cup of coffee on the side. And in a little office above an old restaurant, my first desk still sits, A reminder that success doesn't have to shout. Sometimes, it whispers. And sometimes, it waits. But it always knows what it's worth.